I've got some more stands I've got to pull off the farm that have been in the trees for too long, and it's just a good practice, I think, for everybody occasionally to get all their tree stands down, take a look at them, make sure they're all still safe, put them back up again, because the trees grow, some of them grow really fast, and you can have a tree stand up that, 1 year later gets, the tree starts to work itself around the stand. So I've already pulled this one. I was in here a few days ago shed hunting, and I went up and grabbed that stand out. But I want to talk about this spot really quick. This is the very back end of a pretty good sized ridge that we're standing on right now. I mean, it's a crop field that comes back into this end right here, and then it sort of drops off onto a couple of points, going out that direction, a long ridge that drops off that way, and then a couple of little short secondary ridges that drop off, coming off the field, going toward the south. So everything comes together right here. We've got, like I said, a number of ridges, little secondary points that all kind of dumps into this spot. Well, the beauty of it, and it is starting to be less effective because the fence is starting to fall down from trees, dropping on it and so forth, but there's a fence that runs through here, the full length, except for right behind me, there's an open gate. And I've tried to take advantage of open gates on this farm wherever I could. You can create those artificially. It's not that hard to do. It's just, if you've got a fence, you could put a gate in it, or if it's not one that has cattle, you could cut some of the wires out and create a point where the deer cross. Those are natural funnels. They're man-made funnels is what they are really, but they occur a lot in normal hunting situations wherever you've got fences. So the stand was in that big oak tree behind me over my shoulder. This is a little bit of a tougher one to hunt because really you're only covering that gate. It'd be nice if the stand was up on the edge of the field so you could get a better shot out into this back end of this field, but it just didn't work out that way. That tree set up the best. It does a really good job of covering that gate, but it takes you another 20 yards because I'm just barely inside the field and I'm 20 yards probably from the tree. So it creates a little bit of a longer range shot if you're trying to shoot out into this little food plot or the end of this field. But it does work really, really well for the open gate. You hunt it with a wind blowing out of the northwest. There's a valley that lays down in there between these 2 points. There's a point and a valley in between, and a northwest wind will take your scent right down over the top of that valley. The deer don't smell you. Even when they cross back there, they seem like they drop down below that, and I've never gotten winded by deer on the downwind side of this one when I hunted it on a northwest wind. Access is a little tricky getting in here, but when this is in standing corn, it works pretty good because I think the wind actually blows over the top of a standing cornfield. I don't think it blows through. I think there's too much of a barrier there for the wind to actually blow through it. It basically hits that cornfield and just lifts up over the top. So you can get away with a lot when you're using standing cornfields to go to and from your tree stands. Not only do you stay hidden, but the noise of the leaves rattling from the wind covers any noise you make. Plus, I feel like your scent doesn't get out of the cornfield very far, if at all. So it works good then, but it can be a little bit tricky otherwise. Back in 2017, I killed a nice buck out of here. We called him the Wide 10 out of this stand. And we actually created an access coming down a ditch on the very back side of this major ridge top. There's a ditch that runs down, and we actually cleared that out, took chainsaw and the Hoyman electric pole saw and went in there and cleaned that out. And that's how I was getting in here. I was going down that ditch and then coming up the back side into this tree. So on a northwest wind, my scent stayed pretty much away from this whole ridge complex here. It's a long-winded way of laying out, you know, how this spot works, but it's a pretty cool location, and I'm sure it's going to be productive in the future. I've had 2 kills here, the one in 2017, and I had a really nice buck I shot here in 2008 too that was coming through that open gate. So it's one of the better stands on the farm. Like I said, I've already got it down, so I'll throw this in the back of the Kubota here, and then we'll go on to the next one.
It's November 9th, Sunday morning, and as you can see, we're going to give you a pan here in a second of this location, but it's just a perfect spot. There's 3 ridges that all come together right down in front of the stand, and there's an open gate where all these trails converge. And this time of the year, with the bucks kind of moving from ridge to ridge looking for does, it should be a great spot. There's a standing cornfield out there too that kind of holds the deer right in this area. Hopefully it'll be a good morning, cold and windy, just a classic rut morning, so keep our fingers crossed on this one. Should be good.
Hey.
My knees are shaking now. Golly, that happened fast. It's a great buck.
This afternoon we're heading back into that big oak tree on the edge of that small clover plot overlooking the open gate. And this is where I've been hunting that buck that I've nicknamed the Wide 10. We got a bit of a trip down through this ditch. As I mentioned last time we went in and hunted this spot, we've cleared out this ditch so we can come in through the back door into this food plot rather than going right across the plot and into the tree. It makes the job of getting there a lot harder, but we do keep our human scent away from any place that the deer might stumble into it. Another deer just came out of the point, a doe. She's peeing, which tells me there's probably a buck behind her. She was running from something because I heard something running that way. Yeah. See, they'll squat down and pee like that, so that the buck can smell it and tell that she's not in it. He's behind her. You see it? Yeah. I can't believe that. That's crazy. It's 4 o'clock, maybe even earlier. And that doe squatted when she came out on that point. She squatted and peed. And I said to Drake, there's got to be a buck behind her, because usually they'll squat like that just to show the buck whether they're in heat or not. It's a perfect broadside, 30-yard shot. That is awesome. That's one of the funnest hunts I've had in a long time. Oh, can you believe that? We don't need to stay up here any longer. We're going to go down and look at him. This is going to be the easiest recovery job I've been on in a long time. It just shows how quick your season can change during the rut. I talked quite a bit about the location earlier, but I want to touch real quick on key factors in the hunts themselves. In 2008, that buck, I felt like there was a key point in that encounter where I could have made a mistake. Unfortunately, I didn't in this case. He was about 60 yards away and he stopped. And I could tell he was trying to decide what to do. And my temptation at that point was to call to him, but I think that would have been a mistake because then he would have had something to maybe create suspicion around. Whereas I waited until he told me what he was going to do before I reacted. If he would have turned to his right, which would have been my left, and started to move in that direction, I would have called. But because he started coming again towards me, I didn't call. And I think that I did, like I said, I was tempted, and I'm glad that I didn't, because I think that could have, put him just enough on edge, where he might not have made that commitment and come through that open gate. And of course, the location was obvious with the gate and everything. We've already talked about that. But I feel like one of the most important things in that was something that I didn't do, and that was I didn't call to him when he stopped there. In 2017, that hunt for the wide 10, there was a fair amount of cat and mouse that we played with that buck. He was a pretty easy buck to hunt, really, to be honest with you. That was his home range. He stayed right there. He didn't go very far from that spot. We did create that backdoor entry route, which I felt was super important, so we didn't leave scent, out in front of the stand at all, and we didn't, potentially bump anything out there in front where the deer was most active. But I think the part that really played in for us was that hot doe that came out and brought him out to us so early in the day. So if you can catch that timing, that was the 3rd of November, I think. I'm not 100% sure, but if you can catch that timing, when that first doe in a buck's normal, say, core, smaller range area where he spends most of his time, when that first doe comes into estrus, there's a pretty good chance that buck is going to be on her, because that's what he waits all fall for. He may not be chasing all around like some of the younger bucks, but when that first doe really pops, boy, he's there. So that was the key, I think, on that one, is just a little bit of luck of being there when that first doe popped and brought him, right to the tree. So that's some throwbacks, some fond memories for me, some really fun hunts. Now it's time for us to take a look into the future, where we're going to join Josh Honeycutt in Kentucky, where he talks about one of the bucks that he'll be hunting this fall.
So this is my kind of bouquet. This is not all of the antlers we found, but it is 2 of the target bucks that we chased this fall. And, we had a great season, great shed season, found a bunch of antlers, found some big ones. And, I learned some lessons and relearned others. Historically, I've shed hunted in late February and early March. Found a lot of antlers doing that, but it seems like the bucks are shedding later than they typically have, especially the last few years. But I used my Cuddy-back cameras this year to monitor the antler drop, and that has helped me find more and find bigger antlers this shed season. This year I shed hunted in mid-March, but even still, there were some bucks that had not shed that I didn't realize. On the North Farm, I pushed into a bedding area on March 16th, and one of the bucks that I hunted last fall, GP, he was still packing. I bumped him and 30 other deer out of a bedding area, and he was still packing both sides. So that's unfortunate. I won't find GP's antlers this year, but it was fitting because he got away from me so many times throughout the season, had a lot of encounters. Shed hunting can tell you what deer made it through the season as well, because your cameras can't always do that. Acorn Top was a prime example. I thought this deer died in mid-October, and turns out he didn't. This deer lived. And so because of that, because I picked up his antler, I am making plans this off-season to hunt this buck this coming fall. So shed hunting can teach you a lot, especially if you find these antlers in beds. That'll tell you where deer are bedding during the late season and the postseason. So come next late season, if you find an antler in a bed, you kind of have an idea where that deer likes to bed during that time of year. As far as actually finding sheds goes, there are certain things you can do to find more and find bigger antlers. A lot of people say that all the sheds are in the beds. I have not found that to be true. I usually find 1/4 to 1/3 of my sheds in bedding areas and thick cover. This year I didn't find any though. Every shed I found was in the open areas, food sources, food plots, the edges of staging areas. And you know, this was a prime example right out in the open. Something that I like to do whenever I'm shed hunting in open areas is I like to use ATVs and bikes if I'm on public land, because if you're hunting those open areas looking for antlers, you know, you can cover more ground, you can cover it a little bit faster, and you save your legs too. And that's something that I did this season quite a bit, using those ATVs. Also, use a tracking app that shows where you've been and where you haven't been. I thought that I had shed hunted the entire East Farm, which is where Acorn Top calls home, and I pulled that app up, saw that I had missed about an 1 to 2 acre spot in the field, and boom, went over there, and there this laid. So definitely use a tracking app. There are a lot of them out there to see where you've been and where you haven't been. When it comes to actually spotting sheds, definitely go on rainy days, or at least whenever the antlers are wet, such when there's a heavy dew or something like that. But definitely use your binoculars when you're out there. It helps you spot antlers, especially if you see one in the distance. It saves you from going over there and wasting energy and wasting time in case it's a stalk or a stick or something else. Definitely use your binos. Also, go slow. Don't go too fast. If you go too fast, you are going to miss antlers, and that's just the nature of it. And finally, catalog your finds. Right on the base of the antler, the year and an initial for the property. You can go back, and sometimes if you hunt a deer for multiple seasons, you can tell that you have a shed from that buck, and you may not have even known it. So definitely catalog those just like you would catalog your trail camera photos as well. So how does shed hunting actually help focus on target bucks? How does it help you hunt? Well, if you find an antler in a bed, that can help you know where that deer might be bedding come the next late season. You know, but more than anything, you're out there scouting. You're looking for rubs, scrapes, trails, potential stand locations. You're out there trying to gather as much intel as possible to put together a game plan. Finding these, that's a bonus. That's for fun. But you're out there to gather information. Just like this buck right here. I know he leaves the property come mid-October. I thought he was dead, but because I picked up his antler, I know now that he's not. So I have to put together a game plan that basically gets this deer killed in September or early October. That's what I'm going to focus on come this early season, which brings me to specific target bucks, like Acorn Top. This deer leaves the property come mid-October, so I have to put together a plan to get this deer in September or early October. You know, so I'm hanging stands, putting in food plots, figuring out how to get this deer, and I've hunted him for 3 years, so it's not going to be easy, but that's my goal during the off season. You know, figuring out ways to tag this buck before he leaves and transitions to his fall range come this fall. GP is another target buck that I'm going to be focused on, and this isn't him. This is the tall 7, which ran with GP, and the wide 7, which is the buck I killed. Interestingly enough, GP was in range and in front of one of my cutty-back cameras whenever I shot the wide 7 this past season, and I just didn't even realize he was there. He was just up the hill from me and to my left, and the deer that I killed was out in front of me. But you know, I'm going to be making plans for those deer as well. I already have most of my stands in place for this coming fall for GP, but hopefully this off season I can hang a few more and be a little bit better prepared. You know, something that I like to do, something I take enjoyment in, and something that's made me more successful is I look at the 5 phases of the season. The early season, the pre-rut, the rut, the post-rut, and the late season. And I try to go into deer season with a game plan for at least 2 target bucks for each of those seasons, or each of those phases. So, you know, I'll think about which deer I think are going to be returning, which ones I think will be back. Think about what they typically do historically, and put together a game plan for the specific phases of the season I think that those bucks will be in play, such as Acorn Top during the early season and pre-rut. So that's the biggest takeaway in what I do during the off season. So even though it never happens like you expect it to, things don't always go as planned. Some bucks won't return, some bucks will be dead. At least you've come together with a game plan, and you've put together at least a game plan for 2, if not 3 target bucks for each of those 5 phases. And hopefully within those, 12 to 15 different plans that you have in place, hopefully one of those will come to fruition and you'll fill that tag this fall. Turkey season's here. We're going to be thinking about turkeys. I actually just saw 2 strutters up here while we were trying to film this a few minutes ago, and that's what we're thinking about now, but we never stop thinking about whitetails, and fall will be here soon enough. And something else that you can do this off season is train that shed dog, and it doesn't always have to be a lab.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Looking forward to next week already. I know we'll have some more of these throwback hunts and hopefully we'll start to get into the fields soon. It's getting warm enough now and starting to dry out a little bit that I think I can start getting into my food plots. And I know the rest of the guys on the team are eager to get going as well. Well, I appreciate you joining me this week. We'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail. And remember to always dream big.